So we went through this training for years, and we prepared this MACTAC idea, multiple assault counterterrorism action capabilities is what that's what that acronym means. Basically all it is how do we respond to multiple events at the same time, coordinated attack, but multi-cells of bad guys doing bad things. And so they came up with this idea of these squads, there's always at least 2 squads working in area command. On the slowest night, we'll have one squad that's a stay-at-home and one squad that's known as in the box. And the in the box squad, it's at the beginning of shift, it's delegated right there on the lineups. Dispatch knows everyone in the valley, the watch commander, everyone knows who the in the box squads are that will respond to an extraordinary event, and then who's going to stay home and continue to give police services, because we can't just abandon areas and resource over convergence and all these things we talk about in policing. And so I was the in the box squad that night. So I rallied my team, and the hardest thing I ever did as a sergeant, the hardest call I ever made was get your guns on, get your heavy kits on, get your rifles, and don't leave. I said, you're not leaving. They're like, we got to go now. I said, no, we don't. I said, every cop and their mom is driving 100 miles an hour right now to Mandalay Bay. When the second prong attack hits Fremont Street or the Red Rock up in Summerlin or this part of our valley, we will respond to that and we will handle business. And that was the hardest thing I ever watched, my 5-year pit bull cops. They were so mad at me. Of course, every single one of them came back in the back end and said, good job. That was what we needed.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this.
We could change America if we could put this program in every city.
I seriously don't doubt that.
Yeah. And it's not for everyone. And I know not all law enforcement buy into it, but it's a very noble cause. And I wouldn't be a part of it if I didn't believe in it wholeheartedly.
Where I want to start with this, though, is I was thinking about it today. Any of us who have been in law enforcement or a first responder have dealt with large-scale incidents. Mm-hmm. But being here in Vegas, obviously the Route 91 shooting immediately comes to mind. But what really kind of struck me was we're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of that. And I'm sure it's got nothing to do with me getting older. It's not that. It feels like it was yesterday, though.
Yeah.
But for somebody who was in the middle of it, what's something like that like?
Well, that was the sum of all fears for me. And so a little bit about my background, and I know it's not a rah-rah podcast, but I in all reality, I spent much of my career in the shadows as a counterterrorism detective, working on federal task forces in the classified environments, and then also going back, one of the few that went back as a sergeant, that frontline supervisor. And in that section, we all kind of work at a step above our ranks. So sergeants do like lieutenant work. Lieutenants are doing the captain's the chief. It's one step above because of that constant operational tempo. And so on that night, for me, I was a patrol sergeant at the time. I had promoted in 2016. I was kind of a senior cop that promoted later in his career. So I kind of I really focused a lot of my career on becoming a really great street cop that then moved into becoming a really great investigator and detective that worked a little undercover work on the strip for a minute, but really my passion and my goal was counterterrorism, because I was in the Metro Academy, had already been a cop for 3 years, and then went through the academy again, got hired with Metro week 2.5, 3, and 9/11 happens. So I'm literally sitting up in our training facility at the academy, watch the towers fall down. And so I knew at that moment, that struck me as this is going to be my path. Because prior to that, when I was in high school, I had studied Mideast. I was a political science major in college with an emphasis on Mideast studies. I was always fascinated by the monotheistic religions. I found, the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and how that region, kind of that crescent of the world, where all written history kind of begins in that Middle East region. And so I had always been fascinated by it. And then so, in the academy, 9/11 happens, and it was very evident. And I kind of knew about terrorism and Al-Qaeda and some of those threats, when no one knew what Al-Qaeda even was. And so I just kind of dedicated my path to, I'm going to be a really good street cop. I'm going to get, I really believe that police officers should really spend good time on the streets, and not all police officers are created equal. Not all police departments are created equal. You could work a real nice, super cool, somewhat easy police department for 10 years. And I can put you out here on Boulder Highway or up in our Northeast part. And in 1 year, you'll have the same experience. And so I dedicated kind of my early patrol world to work in high crime, violent neighborhoods, really wanted to cut my teeth, and really wanted to serve the public. I really wanted to engage true bad guys, help the victims, just because you're poor doesn't mean you're a less human being. You have your rights just like we all have our rights. Just because you live in an impoverished community doesn't mean you're any different. And I always kind of prided myself on that idea that I could go out there, hit, no matter what happened in briefing, I could hit the gates, hit the street, and Las Vegas was mine. I owned it. Me and my team, we were going to come back. We were going to go out there and do our very best job that we could, serve the public, honor our oaths, and take bad guys to jail if we had to go to jail, public safety threat issues. And so anyways, back to the 1 October night, I was a patrol sergeant working in our Bolden area command. Bolden is kind of a very unique substation within the metro world. It's where what's known as the historic West Side, where during the segregation days, it's where Black Americans, Black Las Vegas residents had to live. That was basically west of the tracks, west of what now is I-15.
Okay.
And so it's in the 90s, it had a real bad gang issue throughout the 90s, the late 80s and early 90s during that crack cocaine epidemic before I was even a cop. And it always kind of had a little bit of a gangster. There's gangsters that live on that side of town, but ultimately the West Side is kind of a fabulous place, a fabulous little place in Las Vegas where generations of Black Americans and families are living together. And you'll drive by houses on the West Side, and you're looking at it, you're like, this is a beautiful house, and you got the great-grandfather, the granddad, the dad, and the son, and the new baby. You got 5 generations of Black Las Vegas residents living in this house. And I'm like, if that house is up in Summerlin where I live, that's a $1 million house. But because it's kind of at H and Jackson, it's, and it's just, so it's just a unique community. And then in the way we learned, I would like to think we learned here in Vegas that we're never going to arrest our way out of problems. And that community engagement was really, really important. And so they were able to do a lot of engagement on that side in that little section of our center part of our valley. And a lot of those gangsters got moved out, like that weed and seed program, which is a double-edged sword. I won't go down the rabbit hole. But, all of a sudden, you didn't have 500 Crips and 500 Bloods living a block apart. They were all scattered throughout the valley, which brought on different crime issues. But it lowered the crime rates in that neighborhood. And in any ways, we established really good relationships with the pastors, the imams. There's a lot of a religious core section of the West Side. It's near and dear to the sheriff's heart, our elected official, whoever that sheriff is always kind of like, we have to really, really be cognizant that just because folks live on the West Side and they're just some parts of that, not all, but some parts are impoverished, we need to treat people with respect and care for them just as much as we treat, everyone else. Fair and impartial policing ideas. And so I was very proud to work that neighborhood, and I kind of liked that neighborhood because it gave me an opportunity. I was a training sergeant. I was able to become a FTEP sergeant, field training sergeant, very quickly, right after I promoted, because they saw the level of experience I had. They made a waiver for me and a couple other sergeants.
Does Vegas do training sergeants for new officers or training sergeants for new sergeants?
No, training sergeants that supervise a FTO squad.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just the FTO sergeant, and then I have a team of 9 FTOs, of 10 cops. 9 of them are FTOs. And at Metro, you get 8% additional duty pay. So no matter what unit you're kind of in, unless you work in Laughlin or in the rural parts of the county, whether you're SWAT, detective, whatever it is, it's 8%. That's your additional pay. And FTEP, field training, is the same thing. And so anyways, I got to train young cops, which was it was interesting at this point in our world back in 2016, 2017, because what I found was we had toddlers training babies. And when I went through, I kind of felt like when I went through the program, I had FTOs that had 15 years on the job. And they had kind of been there, done that. And all of a sudden, like, I think the stat when I left in August, when I retired in August, was I think 75% of our police department has 5 years or less experience. So a guy like me with, 20 something years, I was a dinosaur. But the bottom line was I got to watch these kind of toddlers who were great kids. This generation, everyone talks smack about these young kids. I've seen some of the most fantastic Americans I've ever seen are in their early 20s wearing a badge and a gun. I always have so much faith for this world because I see young men and women who are willing to step up and serve. Put on a uniform, whether that's the military, a firefighter uniform, a nurse's uniform, first responder, police officer, whatever that is. I am seeing these kids. I don't know if they're out there as much as they were. I know they don't grow on trees, but I'm so impressed with some of the young cops that we've hired. And so I got to watch those 5-year cops train those 1-year cops, which provided me a dynamic of, it was like pull the chains in a little bit, never really had to boot them in the ass. Right. That stick and carrot approach as a street sergeant. And I just kind of got to give them my, like, hey, I don't know everything, but we'll figure it out. If I don't know the answer, we'll go find it. They kind of had a little bit of I think I carried a little bit of they had an awe about me because of my counter-terrorism world, working with the feds on stuff I couldn't talk about. I'm like, yeah, maybe my great grandkids will read the report one day. I can't say it, and you, when you work in that environment, you kind of, I'm secret squirrel, it's like James Bond stuff. I can't tell you, I'd have to kill you. And so these young cops I think they really looked at that. I found as a sergeant, I would find these 5-year cops would come up to me and go, a lot of them work overtime. Our jail, you can't not have minimums. You can't go under minimum staffing in a correctional facility. And so patrol was able to go in and sit and just press buttons and open doors in our jail. And you get 12-hour overtime gigs. It's like, oh, you're even sitting there. And I found out these cops would open up our record systems and put my P number, my badge number in, and they would start reading my reports that, were arrest reports, all these. And so I had guys coming up to me going like, hey, I read a 27-page report you wrote where some people wanted to kidnap and kill a cop. I'm like, you did? They're like, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I'm like, oh, I'll tell you the story one day. We worked with some sovereign citizens that wanted to murder and, kidnap and murder uniformed police officers. They're crazy, but to jail they went during an undercover sting operation that we ran. So I had these young men and women that would, it's for the leaders who are listening, they're researching you. They're doing their research on you. They're checking you out. They want to know if you have earned the right to rank. Now, I know a lot of people who take a test and promote, they're not leaders. They might be managers. Big difference. And we can go down that rabbit hole at another time. So anyways, working Bolden was near and dear to my heart. I was training, and I had a crazy lieutenant that drove me insane, but it was drowned out by amazing cops doing an amazing mission. And I really pushed for community engagement. I don't care if you come in with no arrest. I'd rather you come in with, hey, Sarge, I made 10 stops tonight, consensual stops, and did 10 field interviews, and I think this guy might be a good informant. This guy might be a source. I called the detectives. They're going to follow up on it. I'd rather take that than some piddly, I stopped a guy for jaywalking. He had a crack pipe. I took him to jail. Oh, you took yourself off the street for 2.5 hours while we're running and gunning out here, and a shots fired call or a shooting comes out or a stabbing happens, and now I don't have you because you're at jail thinking that is productive. That is not productive to me. Don't do that again. Right. That was the kind of leader I was. And I didn't care what my chain of command told me. I knew in my heart what the mission was. I knew in my heart how to serve the fellow public, my fellow man. And what's the rule today? There's blood in the streets, there's violent crime. Cool. Have the gang unit come in and police the violence, and we'll go in on the back end and do the engagement. And again, public safety threats, all bets are off. Take them to jail. Someone's, dope dealer, stolen gun in his waistband, ounce of dope in the car, take that dude to jail. That's a bad guy. But little things, build bridges. It's easy to take them to jail and drop them off. It's hard to develop a rapport and a relationship with a person. So I'm working.
If you're not working with your community, you're not engaging them to buy into their community, if that makes sense.
100%. And we can talk about that. But that night of 1 October, I was a patrol sergeant. I just hopped off my tank, and dispatch came on the radio and, called my call sign, and I could hear in her voice something wasn't right. And I called, and she said, we have an active shooter at the Route 91 concert at Mandalay Bay, across the street from Mandalay Bay. And I'm like, sure we do. We get this all the time in law enforcement, swatting, everything. It turns out in the end, it's probably not. And I flipped my radio over to that area command channel, and I heard what at the time I thought was automatic gunfire. It was bump stock gunfire and cops screaming, people down, cops down. And my heart sunk. And my heart broke because I had spent and immediately in my head, I say, this is an Al-Qaeda, ISIS coordinated attack. This isn't anything but that. It's at the Route 91 Harvest Festival. Like everything in my brain, the assumption game started going. I started putting the pieces together in my head. And I said, I failed my mission. I failed as an intelligence officer of the United States, a little speck of sand on a beach miles long. I failed my mission because we clearly did not gather the information to stop this attack from happening. And here at Metro, we implemented a program called MACTAC, which is after the Mumbai attacks in what used to be Bombay, India, now Mumbai. I want to say in 2009 or 8.
I think 2008.
Yeah, something like that. So a terrorist organization, LET, Lashkar-e-Taiba, they're very much aligned with Taliban, Pakistani intelligence services, which is a very corrupt organization in Pakistan. They went across the channel or the sea there and launched basically an assault onto the city of Mumbai and did these multi-prong attacks. And the police there were so underpaid and so broke that they had to pawn their ammo to feed their families. So no wonder they didn't shoot back. So we went through this training for years, and we prepared this MACTAC idea, multiple assault counterterrorism action capabilities is what that's what that acronym means. Basically all it is how do we respond to multiple events at the same time, coordinated attack, but multi-cells of bad guys doing bad things. And so they came up with this idea of these squads, there's always at least 2 squads working in area command. On the slowest night, we'll have one squad that's a stay-at-home and one squad that's known as in the box. And the in the box squad, it's at the beginning of shift. It's delegated right there on the lineups. Dispatch knows everyone in the valley, the watch commander, everyone knows who the in the box squads are that will respond to an extraordinary event, and then who's going to stay home and continue to give police services, because we can't just abandon areas and resource over convergence and all these things we talk about in policing. And so I was the in the box squad that night. So I rallied my team, and the hardest thing I ever did as a sergeant, the hardest call I ever made was get your guns on, get your heavy kits on, get your rifles, and don't leave. I said, you're not leaving. They're like, we got to go now. I said, no, we don't. I said, every cop and their mom is driving 100 miles an hour right now to Mandalay Bay. When the second prong attack hits Fremont Street or the Red Rock up in Summerlin or this part of our valley, we will respond to that and we will handle business. And that was the hardest thing I ever watched, my 5-year pit bull cops. They were so mad at me. Of course, every single one of them came back in the back end and said, good job. That was what we needed. I said, I've seen it for 20 something years. Every time something crazy happens, all the cops fly to right down the street, drive right by the bad guy, like fools rush in.
Well, we get tunnel vision, and you tell us it's at walk and don't walk, and that's all that's in our mind. We got to get to walk and don't walk. We got to get to that intersection. And like you said, we often go right past the suspect, because what's the suspect doing? Suspect's getting away from walk and don't walk.
Yeah. There's a great scene in Colors where Uncle Bob, played by, I forget his name, he's a famous actor, Sean Penn's his partner, Robert Duvall. Bobby Duvall is the senior cop, Sean Penn's the rookie. And I'll keep it PG, for the listeners who might have their kids in the car. But it's Papa Bull, Son Bull, hey, Dad, why don't we run down and screw one of those cows? And
we could just walk down.
Papa says, walk down and have them all.
Yeah.
And I am 1,000% let's walk down and have them all. I will always lose my battle to win the war. I am nuanced in my approaches, and I'm never rigid. I have to call audibles. And I'll say, hey, I was wrong on that. So the hardest thing I did that night was pull the chains in on my cops, because we all wanted to go. The young cop in me, the 20-something in me that started out wanted to run and gun. But I knew that this is the difference in leading and managing. No, and then the second hardest thing I ever did, and they were very angry at me, I made them call their loved ones, because I didn't know what we were dealing with at the time.
Right.
And I truly thought in my heart, some of us might not live tonight. And it was a twofold. I said, for one, I want that adrenaline dump and that tunnel vision to break under the idea that I am a human being who has, some of them aren't married. Call who you love and tell them that you love them. And they were so mad at me for doing that. But I'm so glad I did it, because I think it got them to blink, take a breath, and realize that I kind of live by this motto of memento mori. Death is but a moment away. It's a Stoic philosophy. We're here today, we're gone tomorrow. I don't say it in a like, whoa, we should all be groveling and sad. No, live life amazingly.
But and you bring that up, and that's part of the concept of why I came up with this podcast, in that I want the men and women of first responders in the military community to be thinking about their tomorrow today, because you can't guarantee tomorrow. You might have your plan that's going to be, I'm going to do 25 years, 30 years, whatever. Tomorrow something could change it.
Yes.
An accident, a shooting, whatever.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden you're in a different world of having to adjust for life afterwards.
Correct. I had, over the course of my life, I buried so many people. I lost a father at 13, very young, thrusted into kind of the male of the house at 13, easier said than done. And then in the police career, I had gone through traumatic experiences where I think I was always very able to separate like the body, the shell, that just carries the soul, the essence, the energy of our human existence. And I was always able to separate that until a good friend of mine was murdered in the line of duty. Officer Alan Beck, who I went to the police academy with, and his partner were killed by two sovereign citizens in a pizza shop here having lunch. And that was a very dark day for me. And I made a very bad mistake in watching the video from the event, and I should have never done that. And so that caused me, I could not compartmentalize that in my brain. And I started to have I would see it over and over on this replay. I would go down this rabbit hole of watching that video would play over and over. And so I had to go to therapy. I couldn't sleep at night. I wasn't suicidal at all. I was just consumed by death. And all of a sudden my heart beats, I'm having panic attacks, mild ones, but I'm starting to freak out, and my heartbeat starts going crazy. My blood pressure's going up. And for me, I tend to kind of wear my emotions a little bit on my shoulder. And so I'm sitting down with someone was so helpful for me. She recommended an eye movement therapy, which I highly encourage first responders who have gone through horrific things to look at it. I think it's called EMDR or EDMR.
EMDR. I've had another guest who used it, and he said it worked wonders for him.
I thought it was hocus pocus when I heard it, and then I started doing research. It was created for like Vietnam veterans who had, and anyways, the way it works in the brain, and I highly encourage people to look at therapy in the first responder world. I just say this: being a cop isn't normal. I don't know what normal is in today's modern Western society, but I can tell you that, putting on body armor and a wool uniform and a 15-pound whatever gear duty belt, and it's 110 degrees outside, and going to hit the streets and chasing people around who are high on PCP with superhuman strength, it's not normal. And I remember I was sitting on hour 20 we had some case that we were working where some tweakers had made some explosives, some TATP. And I was sitting on hour 20 on a surveillance, kind of knowing where we had one guy left to kind of track down and catch him. And whenever you find anything that goes boom, you got to run that to ground in the counter-terrorism bomb squad world. You don't just go, we think we got everything. We know everything about everyone, who's his mom, who's his cousin. We want to know, like the bosses will never be and nor should they. That's where I think it's time to turn on the machine and smoke your people, is when those very chips are down. You can't be on every single event.
Right.
But I remember sitting on hour 20, and I'd been up, and I was smoked, and I was battling a person of rank above me that was being obtuse, Like I'd already done something. We'll do it again. I did it again, do it a third time. And I'm just like wanting to beat my head against a wall. And I remember saying to myself, it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, oh, this isn't normal. It's not normal to be up 20 hours stressing and sitting in a car and then, not eating right. And this job isn't normal. It's needed. It's fun. It's the best job. I don't know what else I could have ever done. I wouldn't have traded it for the world, but it's not normal. And it will chip away at your armor. And I remember in the academy, I was like, they're never going to faze me. And it fazed me. In fact, I think the guys and gals who go, it's never going to faze me, are the ones who get punched the hardest by life. That Mike Tyson punch comes and you just can't even believe it, how hard it hits.
I'm going to loosely say I don't think that there's anything wrong with feeling like it's not going to bother you, but at the same token, don't die on that sword if you're starting to experience symptoms that are, like you said, maybe it's something where all of a sudden you're not sleeping at night.
Yes. Don't
just play it off like, I'm going to sleep. Mm-hmm. Start looking at the bigger picture. Start digging to the bottom of it.
Absolutely.
You made a comment that when you first heard the radio traffic and the shots being fired and the officers screaming, in your mind, you immediately went to a terrorist attack of a foreign entity.
Correct.
How long until you guys learned that it wasn't that?
So we finally ended up driving down to the command post, and the fog of war had fully set in. And I don't like to say war in a civilian policing concept, but that's really just the best term, the fog of the incident. The emotional response that I've seen so many times. And so what happened was we got to the command post, and all of a sudden a sergeant gets on the radio and she's screaming shots fired at the Paris. Or I'll be on Sunday doing a 1 October presentation where I stole a bottle of water because I didn't have any water with me. I have to pay the Paris hotel back. But anyways,
for those listening, it's for the crime
convention here in town. And so so the lieutenant looks at me and says, "You're strike team 13." I go, Vegas, lucky 13. Of course we're strike team 13. Go. So I grab up, and what was interesting was before I had responded to the main scene, I had a huge team of training officers and trainees. I'm not taking 20 cops with me to this scene. It's more isn't better. So I said, and plus, not all of them are created equal and tactically proficient.
Well, have they all worked together in a single unit prior to that?
You're only in, like, your field training rotations are only 3 weeks at a time.
So there's no way to know how each of them are going to interact with the other person.
And the guys out of the academy, I'm sorry, guys. Maybe you were a Navy SEAL before this, but probably not. You're probably selling Coke for the, Coca-Cola company and delivering it, and now you're a cop. So I'm not going to take you to the worst mass shooting. At the time we didn't know, but, a tactical incident of this magnitude. So I split my team in thirds. I said, we need to go and send a team to UMC, University Medical Center, which is the state's only level 1 trauma center. I said, if we lose UMC.
For the entire state?
For the entire state. Now Sunrise right down the street is a trauma center, but they're just not level 1. It's just a fancy thing they like to say. But, we have 2 trauma centers in Las Vegas, and Reno has one. But nonetheless, I said, if we lose UMC trauma, we lose the Valley. It has saved more people's lives than vaccines. It's one of those places that. So I sent a third of my team. I said, you will go lock down. For one, we're going to have an influx of people. We'll need witnesses, a log, a scribe. Someone's going to have to keep an eye on that. And plus, we need to completely safeguard UMC trauma, because if a cop is dying, if a citizen needs immediate care, the trauma center must maintain. It must stay on. So I sent a third of my team with their guns, the rifles out and all the stuff, and don't let anyone drive a car through the doors. Don't let anyone with a heavy coat come walk in it. It's like, don't let it happen. Don't let them attack UMC. And then I sent the other third to our police headquarters, because I knew that command staff, all the counter-terrorism section was going to fire up. Everyone in any kind of an investigative capacity was going to respond to one central location. So I wanted to safeguard our headquarters. So I sent a third of my team there. And then the rest of my most tactically proficient, all of them now on the SWAT team, those guys that I knew how to handle business with a rifle and in close quarters tactics, which I often learned from them. I was very tactically proficient, but I'm like, hey man, if you've been to the SWAT school 3 times, I'm gonna follow you right now.
Right.
And I told him, I said, I'm in charge. If I go down, you're in charge. If you go down, you're in charge. And if you go down, then there's nothing that we can do. We have no control. Stay off your radios, handle business, be professional. And I said, execute, and they went. And I've never been prouder. And so we respond over. So anyways, we get to the rally location, shots fired at Paris. We fly down to the Paris, and I come walk, and I said, and I remember driving on Las Vegas Boulevard at 70 miles an hour, and I'm not driving, my guy's driving. I'm kind of in that first officer position. And I remember driving past the Paris thinking that terrorists with like AK-47s were going to open fire on us. I'm like, and I remember like, oh, this is going to suck maybe. And they're like, Sarge, we're just going to pull right into the main valley. I go, no, go onto the north side. There's like a sports book entrance. I'd parked over there many times when I kind of worked undercover on the strip. I kind of knew that was one good thing of working the strip intricately was I knew the little nooks and crannies. So we pulled up on that north side and we came in, and immediately I was like, oh, can't be that bad. I see some lady over here still gambling. Security's like, ma'am, you got to go to your room. We're shutting everything down. And she's like, drunk. What's going on? I went in. I had to get some water. I took a bottle of water out of the little convenience store there. And we start to move through the casino. Like, we're not hearing anything. It's people are just walking around and we're not hearing shots fired. I would think if there were shots fired, you would know it. And then another team, we kind of met in the middle. I'm like, did you hear shots fired? I didn't hear shots fired. And so what was happening was, hey, I heard someone say that they were shooting at the Paris, and the sergeant who got on the radio let that amygdala hijack take hold instead of taking a couple breaths, breaking the tunnel vision and going, I'm getting reports of shots fired at the Paris. Can you send me a strike team? That kind of thing.
Right.
And then we found that what was happening was just the echo reporting of throughout the night was like someone runs into the Tropicana, oh my God, they're shooting, and then security calls in, hey, there's shots fired at the Trop. So all these shots fired calls, then you get the trolls all over the world on their internet phones calling in shots fired here. So our 911 center got inundated with ghost calls, those fake calls. You had echo reporting from people thinking, I heard someone say shots fired. Now they just say it was shots fired.
Right.
And so,
did you find that? And I'll use the example of a ripple effect. So you have your center point where the original shooting occurred, but as you rippled out from that, were less and less people even aware of what was going on, or did all of the Strip or Vegas kind of have an idea that something major was going on?
I remember talking to a person in dispatch who she said it was eerily quiet that night. And so I think most of the city knew that something bad had happened. And excuse me. And so, yeah, it was almost like there was peace in the valley with the exception of our horrific incident. And we ended up, that night, I ended up taking kind of charge of the Tropicana Hotel, where I think maybe about a third of the victims from the scene had responded. I had 2 North Las Vegas police officers. North Las Vegas is kind of its own city. They were their city police department that came to help. And I had 2 Northtown cops and 2,000 people in this convention center. And they came out and said, hey, we're in here alone and we don't know we need help. And I go, let's go. I took my team and I got in there, and I'm in the back convention center of the Trop. And I realized we have a lot of people here. Almost all of them are under the influence of alcohol.
Did they just self-evac?
They self-evac, and like kind of as they kind of came north from the event where the shots were hitting.
That was where they hunkered down.
That's the next structure of cover is the Tropicana, and they kind of went to the back of it because that's where they have like a convention area. And so I knew I'm always leery of big crowds. Crowds need to be managed and controlled, and if you don't, I'm also a big believer of feeding the monster. Like, give people a little something. They want to hear from a leader. They want to hear from the government. They want to know what's going on. So I told my team, I said, I had a lady come up and she had blood and brain splatter. And she's like, my mom was standing next to me and she went down and I don't know what happened. And I'm like, let's get her out of here. We're not going to make her stay. Because we're just trying to contain. I'm a big 4 C's: contain, control, coordinate, communicate. That's every problem you have, whether it's 1 October or a perimeter where some knucklehead runs in a house and isn't listening to verbal commands. The 4 C's.
Well, and that's why I brought up this question, is because all of us have worked large incidents. This is a large incident beyond large incident. This is, the Boston Marathon
yes.
Bombing. for those old enough to remember, this is the Olympic bombing in Atlanta. That grand of a scale of event.
Yeah. And that's the problem with leadership is everyone wants to be like a captain's like, I'm the IC. And then another captain's like, I'm the IC. And like, you can't do zone defense. Or I'm sorry, you can't do man-to-man coverage. You got to do zone defense in a mass casualty incident. And so I just knew like, okay, let's get anyone with brain matter on them out. Let's get them to a hospital at a minimum. And then the guy who's like, I'm going to effing kill the guy. Give me your gun. Drunk, raging. Get that guy out. Because that guy will infect all the other drunks.
Right.
And then I got a bullhorn and I just addressed the crowd. And at the time I didn't know. So anyways, to go back to answer your question, I remember getting to that Tropicana Las Vegas Boulevard. There's a picture of me in uniform that the AP took of me on the phone, and I had my rifle slung. And that's kind of where we started. We posted up once we were done at the Paris. We came back and we were just kind of like, let's just protect this intersection because that's kind of where medical had done a triage station. And I saw one of my buddies who was an FBI agent that I worked on the Joint Terrorism Task Force with. And I walked over to him and I said, hey, any news? And he looked at me like I was a ghost. He says, I didn't even realize that was you until a couple minutes it dawned on him like, oh, that's my old partner. With all the gear on, he just didn't recognize me. And so long story short, I go, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, what is it? And he goes, some dude from Mesquite. And I'm like, then I immediately went to the Bundy Ranch incident where we had this, in our county, it's about 40 minutes outside of town. This guy's a kind of a sovereign citizen, constitutionalist rancher, and the BLM wanted to round up his cattle. I'll let everyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about can Google it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give him any more credit than he needs. But they had what happened was there was a standoff up in Bunkerville, which is, like I said, 40 minutes out of town, and that had attracted a lot of militia, sovereign, anti-government, just don't like the government people, good old boys with guns. It kind of coalesced everyone into one sitting, where it kind of came to a head with the Bureau of Land Management. I say BLM. I always forget there's two BLMs.
Yeah.
Here in Nevada, the old BLM. Yeah, the old BLM, the Bureau of Land Management. Nevada is owned. 98% of the land in Nevada is controlled by the federal government through the BLM. They don't own it. We own it, but technically, they manage it. And so this standoff happened, and the guys who killed my friend in the pizza shop had been at the ranch. They were sovereign citizens. They don't believe in police officers' right to tell people what to do. And then my gear shifted to going, like, I heard Mesquite, which is like 10 minutes up the road. It's all kind of one. It's a big Mormon community in Bunkerville, and then a little bit more of a retirement community in Mesquite. And I'm thinking now, it's like thinking instead of international terrorism, IT, I'm thinking domestic terrorism, DT. But I'm like, why would like one of those folks open fire on the country crowd? Just my brain couldn't process it.
Right.
And come to find out, it was none of it. It was some horrifically evil man who made a horrifically evil decision. Like he was going to stomp on ants on an ant, like he was going to kill the ants coming out of the ant, like just shooting people from a distance. He never had to see what happened. He never had to go get up close and personal. Just carnage and just payback and hate and revenge. And then that was it. His life was over. I won't even say his name.
So then from there, let's go backwards. Where'd you grow up?
Born and raised in Las Vegas. Dad was an immigrant who worked for Howard Hughes.
Immigrant from where?
England.
So you're first generation here?
On my dad's side, I'm first generation American. And my dad worked for Howard.
We share that in common.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Not from England. Mine's from Italy.
Okay. Yeah, Europe. I am kind of proud of that. I like the idea that, I can say I'm a first generation American on my dad's side. I think on my mom's side, we maybe landed in the Mayflower, but on my dad's side, I'll milk it as much as I can.
Yeah, you worked for Howard Hughes?
My dad worked for Howard Hughes. People don't believe it. I have letterhead to prove it. My mom was a showgirl who ended up creating her own very successful interior design company and general contracting company here in Las Vegas.
What brought your dad to Vegas?
The casinos. That was it. When the mob was on their way out, when the corporations were kind of taking over. And like I said, my dad died when I was 13, and I definitely grew up in his shadow. He was an amazing human being, larger than life, 6'5" Englishman, Savile Row tailor, custom suits, running the casinos. And so there was always this air of mystery where there was talk of British intelligence, British Royal Marine, maybe MI5, MI6. He always had people around who were CIA, FBI, Scotland Yard, intelligence community people my whole life growing up. I think maybe my dad was just this super cool guy that ran casinos and comped people, like, yeah, give them a comp, like comp their drinks, comp their dinner. And back in those days, it was corporate, but it wasn't so corporate as the mob was getting pushed out.
Right.
And then when Hughes sold to Del Webb, and my dad went to work for Del Webb Corporation, where he managed the Sahara, and then ended up being VP of the Mint, which is now gone. It's Binion's horseshoe. I'm getting my tattoos, of
all the old school,
the homage to my parents, my mom, the showgirl. I'm getting a Vegas kind of homage here in my sleeve. But born here, grew up, went to high school here, private Lutheran school, Faith Lutheran, graduated, went to Reno for a few years, and I started my law enforcement career. I spent 3 years up in Lake Tahoe. I was a deputy sheriff.
Do you come from a big family, brothers, sisters?
I have a half sister who's in England. I have my sister here in town. I'll be very honest with you. I came from a very dysfunctional, a very at time affluent family, but extremely equally affluent, equally dysfunctional. Alcoholism, drug addiction, just decimated my whole family. I always say we went from Prada to nada. My mom, I grew up over in a very nice neighborhood, in some of the older ranch homes in a neighborhood here called Scotch 80s. I begged my mom to sell it. The markets crashed. My mom got what was almost $1 million home. She got $3,000 cash for keys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And just alcoholism just took my whole, just decimated so much of my family. Drug addiction decimated a lot of my family too.
For you growing up, what was childhood life like? Were you deep in school? Were you sports?
I'm a comedian at heart. I was a goofball. I probably should have been a comedian. If I hadn't been a cop, I think I might have become one. Everyone always says, dude, you're so funny. You should write a book. You should do comedy. I said, I don't think I'm that funny, but I do make people, I crack them up once they get to know me, know, but getting up on stage and telling jokes, I don't know about that. I've done it once. I did pretty good, but growing up, I was just kind of a goofball kid. I was a pretty, if I wanted to be a good student, I was a good student. And, if I was into it, if I wasn't into it, I didn't care. I was the guy in college that would fail math. I hated math. I was always bad at it, where my dad could add any group of numbers in his head, could count a 7-deck blackjack shoe. I did not inherit that gene. I was more of the history, English. I like that side of studying. Like I would get an F in math and an A+ in history or in English. Like I had a great professor and we'd go drink beers and I'd write stories and I'd get the A there and the F. I'm like, wow, math 120.
That's a C. It's a balanced out C.
Yeah. So
you mentioned that you started studying the monotheistic
yes
entities while you were in high school.
Yes.
What drew your attention? You said you liked history, but what drew your attention to that subject?
Well, for one, I went to private school almost all my life, and most of them were Christian private school, with the exception of a year where I went to a public elementary school, and then I went to a Hebrew Jewish private school here. I'm not Jewish.
What prompted that?
My mom was like, "That's where all the rich business people are. Oh. That's where I'm going to put my kids." Like, okay, maybe in high school that works. I don't know in the 3rd grade if it's going to work. I don't remember anyone's name.
They're not offering internships, Mom, in 3rd grade.
Yeah. So that was a struggle. I was very much,
the outsider.
I was the outgroup. Yeah, I was very much outgrouped in that, and I got my butt kicked every day and I'm not mad. I was like, hey man, I'm different. I'm not like you. I'm the outsider. And so I got to experience a little bit of that in my life when people say, oh, you don't know what it's like to be a minority. I'm like, I've kind of experienced a little bit of it. I'm not saying I've walked in all the shoes, but I've at least, I can empathize. But I was always interested in religion. I think maybe for a second I entertained maybe going to like seminary school I was always fascinated by the Bible, and I read the Quran, and I was just always fascinated by the monotheistic religions I was always fascinated by world religion, just not monotheism, but there's Hindus and there's Taoists and there's all these different religions depending on where you're at on planet Earth, or none at all. you know?
I wonder how much of that was driven by being forced into schools of different religion at a very young age.
Yeah, maybe it's just in my subconscious is like, we got to adopt and learn new things. I was, after my dad died, you know, there was a few men that took me under their wing and kind of mentored me. And one of them happened to be, he's still a friend of mine today. He's an imam. He's a Muslim imam. His name's Mujahid Ramadan. And he works with the Metro Police Department here doing, he used to do cultural diversity training. And so when I was my dad died at 13. So the next year I'm 14 and Imam Ramadan's coming in teaching Islam. And I just had I was fascinated. I asked questions and he would come and take me to lunch. Never once ever tried to convert me. I went to high school. So his daughter was one of my classmates. So that's kind of the link too. I was friends with his daughter. And so to this day, after 23 years, we're still friends. I was just on his radio show. He has a radio show here in Las Vegas, and we were promoting some stuff with Hope for Prisoners. I just went on for a couple minutes. But just like, you know, I always was fascinated by the world's religions. And, you know, I think you know, obviously in America, we're a kind of a monotheistic Christian nation. Not that everyone is, but at a minimum, I think we were founded by deists. You know, at the time they thought, well, maybe there is a God and I'm not him. And so, and then I was always kind of fascinated by the terrorism aspect of things, where back in the 80s, and especially having a father whose friends were CIA, one of my dad's best friends was a guy named Mal Kalp. And Mal was killed by a drunk driver who's a CIA case officer. And he was one of the hostages held for the 444 days in Tehran when they stormed the embassy. If you ever saw the movie Argo, he's in that movie. His character is portrayed, and there's a stamp in Iran that they published where they had a blindfolded American with a burning flag in the background. It's a very famous picture. That's Mal Kalp. I met Mal at my dad's 40-something birthday at the Top of the Mint steakhouse, asked him for his butter knife to cut a balloon, and he pulled a dagger out of his back, you know, in a scabbard. Larger than, I literally say I grew up on the shoulders of giants. Mal Kalp sent me a package one day, and I open up this package and I pull this flag out and this letter on CIA letterhead. Now I'm young, I can't read it. My dad reads it. He says, "Dear Ashton, I'm giving you this flag, which is a Viet Cong flag. And I captured this flag when my unit stormed this hut and I sliced this North Vietnamese general's throat and took the flag off the cot from which he slept, which was above his head. I now present it to you."
Well, the flag's a cool gift. Maybe not telling a little kid
right.
the extent of the story.
And I'm embellishing a little bit, but he basically killed a North Viet Cong general, took his flag, and gave it to me. Of course, I lost the letterhead. I think the letterhead is probably worth more than the flag.
Right.
Still have the flag. You know, so this is the kind of the world I grew up in, where these guys were in this world of, wow, man, that's the real deal right there. That dude like jumped out of an airplane into a village and killed a general for this country. And so, so I was fascinated by terrorism because I knew Mal I found out he was held hostage, and I started doing research as a kid on, at the time, the Sunnis are our friends and the Shia are the bad guys, you know, like how quickly the tides change.
Right.
Really, I don't say Sunnis or Shias are against us. People have their belief sets, and then they have their politics, which will be a whole other conversation for another time. But so I was always, fascinated in those things. The religious side of why people do things.
Now, you said coming out of high school, you went into college. So what was your game plan for adulthood?
I had no idea. I just knew I wanted to get out of Vegas for a minute.
Okay.
I needed to get away from the craziness of my family. I'm a big believer that young men, and at the time I didn't know how to articulate it, but now I know exactly what it was. Young men have to go on a quest. They have to go slay their dragon.
And so you went to Reno.
So I moved to Reno, and I just went to college. And ultimately, I knew I wanted to go into law enforcement. But
so you were already thinking law enforcement.
I had met so many cops growing up. I would remember being 5, 6 years old, and Metro Police cops would come by my dad's house to visit my dad. Because my dad was so known in the Valley because of what he did as a casino executive. And he had done some things to help out. He testified against the mob.
Well,
he was part of that. When they raid in the movie Casino, when they raid the Tangiers, that was the Stardust. They also raided several other casinos, including the Fremont downtown, which is now owned by the Boyd Company. But at the time, the Nevada Gaming Control Board made my dad the interim general manager. They went in and did the forensic audit, and they were like, this is the skim. He had to go and testify against it. I had a bodyguard when I was in school. I had this guy standing at the playground, and everyone's like, who's that? I'm like, oh, it's just my dad's friend. He just keeps an eye on me and my sister. I didn't know until I got older that, oh, that was so-and-so, who's my dad's friend from the Hughes days, who was a bodyguard, 300-pound Tongan guy who could run a 2-second 40. Like huge, but fast.
Right.
And probably armed, and so that I had always been around law enforcement. We would have cops come by the house. I'd chirp the siren. I'd hear the radio. I was infatuated with it. My dad was friends with the sheriff, the elected sheriffs of the 70s and 80s at those times. A guy named Ralph Lamb, kind of the last cowboy sheriff. John Moran, who kind of brought Metro into this modern era. Then those men themselves, living legends. In the movie Casino, Pesci is talking to De Niro, and De Niro says, hey, the sheriff out here isn't afraid to put you in a hole himself. That was Ralph Lamb. My dad took me to Ralph Lamb's ranch when I was a little kid. He knew Ralph Lamb. So I was always around law enforcement. My dad's best friend was an FBI agent who at the time was working undercover on mobster money laundering cases. And so I grew up around these men who were just they're like living legends to me now. You look back and I'm sure they were flawed characters. I'm sure they had their issues, but when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, it's just like, wow.
Right.
It's like,
they seem larger than life.
It's larger than life. Like one night my dad comes home with 2 guys from Scotland Yard. Like, wow, Scotland Yard, Sherlock Holmes. So I just kind of grew up in that world.
So did you end up getting your college degree before you started law enforcement?
Nope.
What prompted the dropping out? Was it just that continuation of just not applying yourself?
Yeah, I was drinking, partying, having a great time, chasing girls, party, just the happy, fun-go-lucky comedian, cracking jokes. What are we doing Friday night? We're going to this place. We're having pizza, beer, and we're going on to the frat house. I started to realize, like, this isn't going to sustain. I'm paying my own money from my dad's trust fund. Like, I'm wasting my money. What am I doing? I should have jumped on a plane and gone and toured Europe for a couple months. So I figured out that, all right, I had enough money left and I had to do get a little bit of a loan through my bank. And there was a police academy where now in the community colleges, you can pay your way through if you're not sponsored. And I tried to get sponsored by the University Police Department. My buddy got it, and they just didn't know me very well. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I knew I needed to do something with my life, and I knew the boy had to die and the man had to emerge. I teach people today, we have to kill the boy to emerge the man. Our country is filled with man-child people, and to me, it's like the number one issue we're facing, in my opinion, as a nation, are men who never got out of that boy stage. So I said, I put my application in, and I'm 20 years old and they accept me. Now through my dad's contacts, the former undersheriff here in Las Vegas years ago was a hero to me. His name's Eric Cooper. He's been retired 30 years. He lives up outside of Reno. Eric vouched for me. He'd always kind of kept an eye on me. Another guy who took me under his wing and would stop by the house and check in on me after my dad passed. And so Eric kind of vouched for me, and they let me in the academy. And then once I graduated, he helped me get a job with the sheriff's department there. I took the test, and next thing you know, I'm a deputy sheriff. I took my oath in like June of '98. Completely had so much to learn. I remember I'm 21 years old with a badge on my chest and a gun on my hip. I couldn't believe it.
And that's 1998?
1998.
And you retired what year?
Last year, 21.
When you were coming up on your retirement, was the end obvious to you? Did you know that, hey, I'm done with this?
I'm done. Yep. 2020, I'm done.
Was that in your mindset for a long time, or did it kind of come on quickly?
I read a book early in my career called Force Under Pressure, How Cops Live and Why They Die. And in a nutshell, it's basically a study of, if you talk about law enforcement entities as institutions, LAPD, can't deny it, it's an institution. And you'll see granddad with hash marks up here, dad hash marks here, son hash marks here, other son in the academy. You'll see that generation of cop. And the studies basically said, the guys who do 33 years, pull that full 90 whatever percent big money retirement. Of course, the PERS system loves them because they're dead within 5 years.
Right.
Or less. And I'm all for making good money. I like the fact that I have a great pension and I'm very thankful for it. I want to live to 100. I want some kid who hasn't even been born yet who goes to work for the public employee retirement system to go, who is this Ashton Packe guy? He's 98 years old. He's taking
our money.
He's taking 3 times out what he put in. That's my dream. That's my vision. 100-year-old retired cops.
I tell officers that all the time.
Yes.
I said, your first goal after retirement should be to get as many years that you put into retirement out of it. That should be your first goal.
I was born in 1977, and I hope my gravestone has 2077 on it. Okay, I hope. There's a dash in the middle. And that dash, how you fill it and what you do and the choices you make determine the number that's at the end of that. Now, I could walk out today and a stray round hit me in the neck, drunk driver take me out, memento mori, death is but a moment away. But I'm going to put as much time and energy and live my life in that dash as humanly possible. And that's what I want every single first responder to have the vision of. I bought some time from our state retirement system, and I bought that years ago at a very great rate. That smartest decision I ever made was to buy the 2.5 years of service that would bring me to that 25 mark.
Right.
I got a lot of time. I got a lot of experience in my 23 years. I did a lot of cool stuff. I checked a lot of boxes. I didn't check all of them. You can't. Some guys take the tactical route. Then double down on it, man. Get that physical fitness part of your life under your belt. Run that O course and be the very best guy going through that door when something crazy is in this room. If it's investigations, double down on it. Find what you love and double down on it. Just put all your energy into that. If you just want to do 25 years pushing a black and white, I'm not mad at you. But be the very best cop you can be the very best firefighter you can be the very best. And I personally just don't think comfort and equality are false gods. Stop being comfortable. Like I would get 3 years somewhere and I'm like, I know where every hole in the wall is. I know where Tweaker Tom jumps the fence. I know that pipe is in that dude's pocket right now. You're comfortable. I'm not saying now you have to promote or you have to become a detective. Move the area. Like I just want to be a 25-year patrol cop. Okay, cool. Work all the different areas that you can get your hands on. Work for different people. I heard that guy's a pain in the ass to work for. Go work for him. Prove that he's a pain in the ass and exceed their expectations. And if you get there and it's truly the guy's a pain in the ass and he's a tyrant leader, then if you work for a bigger agency, you have the luxury of going, I'm going to put my transfer request in to go here.
The only thing I would add to that, and I like that mentality of decide what you want to do in your career and go for it.
Yeah.
But equally important, make the time away from your career as much, if not more important. Your family life, your friends circle, your health, your wellness, make that equally important. Don't make the job all that defines you.
I'll take it a step further. Your job is your side hustle. That's your side hustle. If you're not focused on you and your family, how can you possibly focus on the job? And I unfortunately talk to cops. I don't want to be home. I'm miserable at home. And work becomes the escape. You are asking to put one foot in a grave. Have difficult conversations. Make difficult decisions. Sit down with that loved one of yours and says, I'm bored. This isn't working out. And we need to talk about some things. And if it doesn't work out, then you walk. Come up with an amicable solution. I know it's easier said than done, but live your life. I see cops 23, 24 years old. They're driving Raptors. They're working of their 3 days off, because we work 410s here in Vegas, which I'm a big believer in, because you need one day to just reset everything after being on that tactical condition orange, head on a swivel. You crash. I've seen the studies. I've seen the brain waves. I've seen all the science behind it. And then you have 2 real days off. Work a day of overtime. I'm not saying don't, especially if it's the easy stuff. You're pressing buttons in the jail.
But not 3 days of it.
But you're working 3 days, and what you're doing is every time you put your uniform on, every time you don your body armor, every time you press check your Glock or your 1911 or whatever you carry, you are writing a blank check to your community, cashable at any time. And we all know the risks. I wrote many blank checks for many days for 23 years. But some days I just knew I'm not doing anything unless that phone rings and something's blown up on the strip. I tell my lieutenant, I tell my sergeant, hey, I need a day. Don't call me tomorrow. If you need something, let me know in the next, plan it. And if you have those lines of communication with those bosses, if you have a sergeant or a lieutenant that's worth their salt, you can go to them and say, hey, I'm having some issues. I really need not to be called for overtime unless it's absolutely necessary. Now, in some units, like I was in the counter-terrorism section, you're considered on call 24/7, 365. Now you have to ask yourself, do I want to do that? Do I want to step into that realm? Because I know what those risks are and what they entail. Versus when you're in patrol, you turn your car computer off at the end of the day. You log off with dispatch. Once you're clear your station, guns in your waistband, and you're like, I'm clear, you're off. You can now decompress. So I think you should really focus on you and then your family. And it's easier said than done. Easier said than done.
We definitely in our careers have seen those who have not been able to strike that balance.
No.
And unfortunately, it seems like the numbers are much greater than less. Now, you are retired from law enforcement, but you're still busy.
Oh, yeah.
You went into something different, Hope for Prisoners.
Yes.
Before we go into what you do, what is Hope for Prisoners?
Hope for Prisoners is a nonprofit here in Las Vegas that's focused on helping men and women and young adults re-enter society from the criminal justice arena, that being prisons, jails, and in the world of arrest.
Now, was it founded here in Vegas?
Yes.
Who founded it?
My boss is a fantastic human being. His name is John Ponder. And John is the CEO and founder of Hope for Prisoners. And John was he was a gangster back in the day, and he robbed a bank. He did a bunch of stuff. But long story short, he went to federal prison for bank robbery. And he gets into prison, and he has a little bit of a religious awakening. He kind of, I'm the heart of a comedian, he's the heart of a preacher. He's actually a pastor. But he gets into prison, and he figures out that, he talks a lot about the enemy on the inner me. And he realizes that it's not the cop's fault. It's not society's fault. And it's none of this victim mentality. It's my choices. I made stupid choices that had these horrific consequences that landed me in prison. We can talk about the nuances of some people have been very, very unfairly treated. No problem. We can have that conversation. But at the end of the day, you have a choice to make. And so John gets out. He got very lucky where, what's funny is he becomes very good friends with the FBI agent who arrested him. He develops a pen pal relationship. First and foremost, I want to apologize. I'm going to turn my life around. We cops, we hear it all the time. Sure you are. Good luck. But nonetheless, John puts not just words, but actions. And so him and the agent, Richard Beasley, who arrested him, they develop a friendship. And a federal judge took a little leniency on John, and John didn't do nearly as much time as he could have done. And when he gets out of jail, he comes to Las Vegas, moves back home, and
Which most criminals go back to where they grew up or where home was.
Right, and he's originally from New York, but had been in Vegas for a while there. And he makes a decision, I'm never going back to jail again, and I'm going to turn my life around, and I'm going to then build a prison reentry program that works with police, not as part of the problem, but as part of the solution. He sits down probably in 2008 or 9 with a visionary law enforcement leader, a mentor of mine named Kevin McMahill. Kevin's the retired undersheriff and now running for sheriff of Clark County. And at the time, I want to say Undersheriff McMahill is a captain. Kevin's always been one of those visionary leaders for law enforcement. And He sits down with John, and John pitches the plan, and Kevin basically is like, what do you need from us? And he goes, I need a cadre of cops who are willing to come in, tell their stories, humanize the uniform, humanize the badge, and try to change the perception of how people look at law enforcement. Shortly after the partnership is kind of solidified, I hear about this program where, hey, are you interested in kind of mentoring, I hate to say ex-felons, but, formerly incarcerated, what we used to say ex-cons, and now I say formerly incarcerated individuals. I grew up, I had another guy in my life who's my godfather. He's an actor. His name's Michael Delano. He was the Italian stallion in Rhoda. Okay. He is Andy Garcia's casino manager in the movie Ocean's 11. You Google him, you'll I know that guy. I've seen him in a bunch of stuff. In 1959, he steals a car with his crew, what we would today call a gang, and he drives it from like Philadelphia to Delaware. Cops catch him, and they bring him in. They say, tell us who your crew is, and we'll let you go. And he says, pound sand, I'm no rat. Goes in front of the judge. Federal judge, you drove a car over state lines. It's a federal crime. It's interstate commerce clause. You sure you don't want to? You want to do a year and a day for your boys? And my godfather at the time, young, 1959, goes, I don't know what you're talking about, Your Honor. That's all on me. That car was all on me, and doesn't rat his friends out. And he does a year and a day with the government. His other time with the government was, in Korea, fighting for our freedom. And now he's here, and now I'm, now he's in his, at the time, this is 25, 30 years ago that I meet him. I'm a young kid growing up, like, as a cop, you're like, oh, he's an ex-felon. I can't associate with him. Guy's never been arrested ever again in a day in his life. He's a family man. Lives an amazing life as an actor. But he has this record that follows him everywhere because no president, like, how do you get the pardon? You got to go to the president. Well, how do you do that? Well, good luck. If you think bureaucracy is bad at the state level, good luck at the federal one. And so I took a spirit of the law approach, with a policy. Like, yeah, my godfather is a formerly incarcerated individual, but he's not a person of ill repute. He's a hardworking American who cares very deeply about his community and his family and only wants to do good for his fellow man. And so I always had that in the back of my head of, he's had this record follow him for doing something that I would have done. I would like to think I would have done under that pressure. Now, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not ratting my friends out. Now, I'm not saying we don't go, hey, you did wrong and you screwed up and you got to now take the medicine, especially in policing, professional policing world. But I thought to myself, Michael's turned his whole life around and is now mentoring me and telling me, hey, be safe out there, son. We need you out there. We need cops. Is so supportive of law enforcement. And then my time on the streets, meeting people who are criminally justice impacted folks, just a life of arrest, but they're like, oh, thank God you guys are out there. You would be so amazed how many people truly love us deep down inside. I'm convinced the vast majority of the kids in 2020 who are screaming and yelling at cops, deep down inside, probably say to themselves, I'm really glad I can call 911 if I have to. I really do truly believe that. And so anyways, John gets out, partners, and we start to bring cops in, and I'm one of those early cadre of law enforcement mentors that steps into this room of men and women who are, many of them have just gotten out of prison. Some of them are just like, I got to get something different going in my life. I got, too many arrests. And we start to humanize our lives. We start to tell our stories. And I've heard police officers, not me, I grew up pretty lucky. I have heard police officers who grew up in environments where they 100% should have gone to prison. And I think
I think a lot of people would actually be surprised.
Very.
How many literally teetered on that, one bad decision and I'm not wearing this uniform, I'm wearing a prison uniform.
Yes. There's a thin line, the saying goes, there's a thin line between a crook and a cop. And I don't say crook disparagingly, formerly incarcerated individual and a cop. I go in there and I tell these guys and gals, I go, do you think we have more in common than we don't? I go, let me prove it to you. I go, by a show of hands, and here's the people sitting here and behind me are the cops in uniform. I go, by a show of hands, who thinks they're going to arrest their way out of drug addiction? And not a hand goes up. None of the cops raise their hands. You're not raising your hand. Who here thinks we're going to arrest our way out of gang violence? Who here thinks we're going to, and insert problem here, handcuffs are not going to be the only solution. Now I couple that with we're not going to hug our way out of the problem.
Correct.
But I will tell you in this, so we have this 2-hour session where the cops come in and everyone at the beginning of the session, they're
crossed arms, nobody.
At the minimum, they're like this. I've had guys sitting in their car shaking, afraid to come upstairs because the cops are up there. What happened to that individual? That a person who puts on a police uniform and goes, I'm just here to do my job and serve my fellow man, has become so turned off that he's become such an enemy to that person. What did that? And I go down there, or John will go down there and say, I'm not asking you.
Well, they're the representation of rules. Because if you think about it, go back to when you were a kid and you got in trouble at school and how much you shook all the way home knowing that you had to tell your mom or your dad, hey, I just got suspended. I just got 2 weeks detention, whatever.
Yeah. Stick and carrot.
You know? Yeah. They become the representation of, I've got to face the music for the rules that I broke.
Yes, absolutely. But it also is, it's a situation where it becomes cyclical. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they can't break. We use the analogy of a record. And you put the needle down on the record because there's these grooves. And the grooves were forged. And all of a sudden it's just the same record turning and turning and turning. And it's the same old song. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And John will say, what if we go, and we cut a gouge in that record? It'll skip. Something's not right. The cycle's been broken. And so what we're doing at Hope for Prisoners, people are like, oh, is it a job placement thing? I go, oh, we'll help partner with job placement. But if it was just a job, you never would have ended up in prison. If all you needed was an $18 an hour job, we're sitting on more of them than we can fill. We're a brain rewiring organization. I want you to look at yourself through a new lens. I want you to change the way you think, how you see yourself in the community, how you see yourself as a human being, as a man, as a woman. You're a person of value. You have energy in you, and you deserve to have a good life. But you got to make the right choices. How can we help? How can the cops help you? I go in there, I say, there's a Marine Corps motto, no better friend, no worse enemy. I say, guys, in 2005, I was the number 2 use of force reporter for the entire Metropolitan Police Department in Las Vegas. Number 2, behind a gang detective. I was writing more use of force reports than 2,499 other cops at the time. I wore it like a badge of honor because I was equally, the other number I was very proud of was how many internal affair complaints did I have? 0. Not only was I never sustained, I was never no one ever went in and beefed me. Because when I put the handcuffs on, no matter how bad you fought, when those handcuffs went on, I was the nicest guy in the world. I would carry water in my car. You want a water? I had people that I chased down and fought and put in handcuffs who then got back to my car, and once the adrenaline settled, I remember this kid's like, who's the cop that chased me? He was so mean. I go, I don't know who that guy was. You need some more water? Oh yeah, thanks. Like, I'd stop and get you a hamburger. I don't want to see you doing these things. But the public, we can't live in a society where we don't have, or where we tolerate public safety issues or crime. So if you're done being a criminal, if you're done the life of crime, if you're done with it, what do you need from us to turn your lives around? We put them through a 40-hour workshop. We teach them emotional intelligence, communication skills, how to interview for a job, how to dress for a job, how to balance a checkbook, how to live within your means, ultimately trying to rewire how they see themselves. They graduate from our police headquarters. The sheriff here, Joe Lombardo, very graciously opens up his house to us. We go in there every third Friday of the month and have an amazing graduation where we have cops there, police executives speaking. We have leaders from the community, elected officials coming in. We have the honor guard come, render colors. We salute. We say the pledge. We sing the national anthem. We give them pomp and circumstance. Some of them have never graduated from anything in their entire lives. I encourage anyone who's interested to come watch one of our graduations. It's amazing. And so they come back the next week into an 18-month program where we partner them with a case manager and a mentor, males to males, females to females. And then over the course of 18 months, we have them write their vivid vision in the workshop. Where do you see yourself in 1 year from graduation? And some of these vivid visions are like, they bring tears to your eyes. People who want to just be the best fathers, the best moms they can be. And then we give them their individual life plan. What are your 1, 3, 5-year goals? What do you want to do? I want to have a Michelin star restaurant. Well, maybe we want to start here and get you in a sauce class.
Yeah.
Let's get you in some you want to do culinary? We got you culinary training. What do you want to do? I just want to be a truck driver. I love the big rig. Okay, we'll write the check. We have the grant money, $7,000 CDL school. Here you go. So welding, I want to be a welder. But ultimately, it's not just a job. We have to change how they see themselves in society.
Do you encourage them, or is part of the component them then giving back to the organization when they're done?
It's amazing. Great question. Last night we kind of have our annual, I don't want to say a gala, but we had our dinner last night, our awards for our Mentor of the Year and several other awards that we give out, Humanitarian of the Year, people who have really helped us, stepped up, business owners in this town who have written very large checks. And, in the nonprofit world, it's completely different from the government world. No matter how bad the government does, July 1, there's your new pie. Do with it what you wish. Hey, sheriff, here you go. It's yours for the year. Whether crime is up or down, you get the money, usually a little bit more than the year before. Nonprofit's not the same. Everyone, hey, how can I help? Money or mentor? Write me a check, I don't care if it's $5 a month. Go on our website, sign up, do the $5 reoccurring thing. We'll take anything. It's nonprofit, and we're really struggling out here as they do. But we had our dinner last night, and we had John, and he's so great with the crowd, and he invited some of these rock star graduates, and he has them stand up. And they're telling and I've heard their stories many times, but some people have never heard it. And all of a sudden I've got this guy who's like, I did 15 years in prison. I should have done 35. I got out. I got my life together. Hope for Prisoners changed my life. Walking in a room and there were police officers there who were like, I don't want to arrest you. I want to help you. What do you need? It changed my life. My case manager changed my life. My mentor changed my life. And now they're mentors.
How many years has Las Vegas Metro been affiliated with it now?
Going on about a decade.
And are you finding that the numbers of officers who want to be involved continues to increase?
I'm struggling there, to be honest with you. What we do is we rotate on the area commands. So we have 9 areas in Las Vegas that have a substation, and it's led by a captain. It's kind of like its own little city, chief of police, and then you report to headquarters. And we have these community-oriented policing teams that will come in that we'll rotate them through. And so I'll get a new team that comes in, and a lot of these young cops they have no clue. They're walking through they're kind of voluntold, which we don't want that. So I'm struggling to try to keep the cadre of those men and women who have been coming for so long or who are interested in becoming those new kind of long-term mentors for us. But no matter what, we have uniforms in the house. They show up. And I make lemonade when I get lemons, and I'll get, this last session, a couple young ladies showed up, and the one young lady's like, oh, I'll speak. I wrote a little something, and the other lady's like, I don't want to speak. I'm like, it's like the opposite of Fight Club. If it's your first time, we usually don't want you to talk. We want you to just listen. If I see a guy who, the cop shows up and he's voluntold to do this hug a thug crap, I'm like, just sit and watch the magic. Because not only are the hearts and minds about to change in the crowd of my hopefuls, of my formerly incarcerated men and women, the hearts and minds of these cops are about to change too. 4 sessions ago, I had a gentleman in the class. He did 35 years in prison. He was a hardcore Hispanic gang member, tattoos all over his head, and 35 years goes by, and all of a sudden he's an old man, and he gets out on compassionate release, and he's like, I am done. I don't ever want to do anything illegal again. I don't ever want to spend one more second of my dash to whatever that end number is, incarcerated and locked up. One day he's struggling. I could tell he's in pain. I go, what's wrong, man? He goes, man, I'm just in so much pain, and I got a horrible headache, and I don't have any medicine. I go, let me get you some Advil. And I'm looking at the scar, tattoos are covering a scar. I go, oh man, that's a gnarly scar. I go, do your scars hurt when like the weather changes? He goes, like, like my hip kills me now. As I'm getting older, my knees crack, and whenever the barometer pressure changes. He goes, oh, and he starts lifting up his shirt, and he's showing me scars. I go, what happened? He goes, I got shot like 6 times. And I'm thinking like, some gangster tried to shoot him back in the day. Come to find out, in 1994, he's a gangster doing gangster stuff, and he gets into a vehicle pursuit up in northern Nevada with some highway patrol troopers. And he crashes, and he gets out, and he opens fire on him. And they do what cops do. They shot the crap out of this dude, but he doesn't die. Troopers are okay. Officer involved shooting, dude goes down, and off to prison for what he thought was the rest of his life. And he gets out after 35 years, and he's terrified when the cops are in the room. He's shaking. And I say, now, he doesn't know, I need to preface this, he doesn't know I'm a retired cop. He just sees me in my suit walking around the office. He thinks I'm one of the people at Hope for Prisoners. He doesn't know I'm their director of law enforcement engagement.
Right.
And then I'm a very good friend with the CEO who recruited me after I retired to go like, what are you going to do? Why don't you come work for me for a minute? So he doesn't know I'm former law enforcement. And I say, well, just listen to what they have to say. I promise you'll get something out of it. It's like a workout. You're never worse for wear. You'll always say, I don't want to go to the gym. But once you're there and you get it done and you walk out, you're like, man, I'm so glad I did that. You're going to get something out of it. And in that 2-hour session, I have this guy who went from shaking and afraid to be in the room and tense and not looking at us, any of the cops in the eye. He has tears in his eyes, and he raises his hand and he stands up, and he's got tattoos all down his face, all down his arms, all gang affiliated. You look at him, any cop with their salt go, I know exactly who he is, what prison gang he was with. He's got tears in his eyes, and he says, I just got to say, I am so sorry for what I did back in 1994. He goes, I ran from the police, and I shot at them, and they shot the crap out of me, and I didn't want to hurt those cops. I just wanted to get away. And I got to tell you that what I've seen here today has changed my heart. And he's got tears in his eyes. I'm tearing up. I look over at this young cop who would come in like, what is this voluntold junk? I don't want to do any of this stuff. I want to go out there and hunt. I'm a big game hunter. And this young cop is like, he's got a little bit of a watery eye. And I watch hearts and minds on two polar opposite spectrums, but yet so much in common. I watch that break down. And at the end, the guy's coming over, giving us a hug. Hugging the police. You shot at him 35 years ago when I was a kid in high school. And I said, you should have been dead. The cop, you should have died. But you're here for a reason. The universe has you here for something. What are you going to do with this gift that you're getting? And that dude's crushing it. Last night, we have these guys stand up, give their story. And our mentor of the year last night is a fantastic human being. He's a highway patrol lieutenant named Anthony Munoz. And he had come in. We're kind of trying to get highway patrol and more of the other police departments in our valley interested in Hope for Prisoners, the law enforcement mentoring side. Anthony comes in, me and him, instant friends, immediately hit it off. Fantastic guy. He grew up in a little shady San Jose Bay Area neighborhood, like could have easily gone into the gang life. Pro sports was his, baseball was his saving grace. As so many young men, all they have is hip hop or sports. And that's what we got to change as a country. But he takes on this guy who spent, of a 35-year sentence, he did 11 and a half. He's all tatted all over. And his name's Jack. And man, the minute Jack hit the floor at Hope for Prisoners, the energy, I cannot tell you how much energy this guy has. And he is like, I am so dedicated and I'm so committed to changing who I am. And over the course of the last year and a half, Anthony, Lieutenant Munoz, police officer, is mentoring Jack. And like, no, you're my brother. What do you need? Jack has issues, or hey, so-and-so's fallen off the wagon. Send a trooper out there and we'll get, and like call, and then he calls me and like, yeah, I got him. I'll put him in a sober living place. We'll get him sobered up. It's easy to take the guy on parole who had a couple cocktails or did some drugs and is fighting an addiction to jail, sticks him in there for 2 weeks. Parole, he loses his job. Parole officer comes in, maybe or maybe not, you get out. Maybe you go back to the yard, then you go to the parole board, and 90 days later, your job's gone. No, we put him into a rehab facility, and the guy gets back on the wagon. It's that's the community. There's no public safety threat. The community engagement aspect of law enforcement, a perfect example. And then last night we honor Lieutenant Munoz as our Mentor of the Year. Amazing, amazing work. And listen, not everyone makes it. I remember being in patrol as a sergeant, and I pulled, managed by wandering around, just wait, what's my cops doing? What are they doing over here? And I'd pull up on a scene and they got this dude in custody. And the guy's like, hey, what's up, Sarge? Remember me? And I'm looking at him. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I've so many faces in 20 something years. He goes, Hope for Prisoners. You were the guy that came in. And I bring this Lego rocket, and I use the analogy of the hardest part of getting the rocket to go is getting it 1 inch off the ground. It's like that fail to launch. Not because we're afraid to fail, but for so many of us, we're afraid to succeed. And so he goes, you're the rocket. And he called me Rocket Man. I go, okay, Hope for Prisoners. I go, what happened, man? He goes, meth. I go, yeah, the shadow world sucks you in. Yeah, and hey, take him to jail. He's breaking the law. He's got to go. We'll tell them, don't come here thinking we're going to bail you out. Like, no, you got to go now, atone for your bad choices. But I said, hey, when you get out, when you get to CCDC, when you get to county jail, you call Hope. Get back in the program. Get back into it. That's his choice to make.
Right.
So the program is just such a great model. And then we've gone around to, we're trying to export it. We recently moved. So a lot of the heavy lift in the last couple of months has been the move from a small location to this amazing new location that a very, very wonderful donor gave some money to help us get into. And so we have quadrupled the space. We're going to have a family reunification center. A man goes to prison for 5 years, the mom's at home having to run the show, and all of a sudden he shows back up on scene. It's like, that's hard to take on that role as the man of the house after that woman's been doing all the heavy lifting. What does that look like? Family reunification center. We have a computer lab. Some folks helped us pay for these computers. I have a room full of computers. Some guys are like, this is called a mouse. And others are like, I want a code. What do you need? We'll get you there. We're going to have a satellite college campus from the College of Southern Nevada. We have so much amazing stuff that's coming down the pike. And so as for me and my role there is keep those roots with the cops deep. A lot of those young cops that come in, they don't know me because I was kind of in those, if I didn't teach in the academy and if I showed up on your scene, it was a bad day, something had gone boom. So I didn't show up and that was, testament to the success. I didn't show up on a lot of those scenes. So trying to get this newer generation to understand that we have to start looking through a different lens. You're never going to go out and arrest your way through a problem. That's a tool. Use it when you need it. Like take the hammer out and use the hammer when you need a hammer. But sometimes you need a ratchet. Sometimes you need this. And how can we do things a little bit differently and still serve the public's best interest while not destroying the faith of the institution of American law enforcement, which is a huge concern of mine.
They're going to come out of prison and they're going to come back into our communities.
95, everyone goes, oh my God, ex-felons. They think of child molesters and murderers. They're thinking BTK, Ted Bundy. I go, stop looking at everyone with like snake skin and fangs and sulfur is pouring out of their skin. And just look at the person in the supermarket who just had a drug addiction and stole some cars. 95% of them are getting out. What do you want them to have? $50 and a good luck pat on the back? Or a program that's keeping cops safe? No one goes through the program. Some people go through, and it's like I said, they don't buy into everything that we have to say. I'm not trying to sell everyone. But no one comes to the program and doesn't at least in the back of their mind go, there are some cops out there who have a give a shit factor. who care a little bit about their community. And I can lean on some of them within reason to know that, they got my best interest at heart. So they're going to get out. If they're going to get out, let's do something to help them. I see so much energy in the men and women in our jails. I tell them, I go, there's more energy in our prisons right now than under all of Saudi Arabia ever. There are men in prison right now who they had gone into an Explorer program, an ROTC program, some kind of a, that world. They would have been rock star officers, NCOs, cops, SWAT operators. They would have crushed it. They're alpha. They're like, we're all alphas. Some of us are hyenas. Some of us are lions. I said, we're all alphas. You just got the toxic side of it. You got that shadow world of it that got your hooks into you.
You mentioned something previously, the one gentleman with the face tattoos. As a society, I don't care how you want to say it or not, we judge people based on how they look. Mm-hmm. Do you guys encourage getting the facial tattoos removed?
That's their choice to make. I always joke, nothing says economic viability like facial tattoos. But I see these guys, the guys that look the scariest are the most amazing people. It just blows me away. Like the guy who's got the crazy tattoos over his head. I see him in the class and go, that's the guy that's going to crush it.
The problem is even in 2022, the greater number of people in society are going to judge him negatively. They're never going to give him the opportunity to get past the face tattoos.
Sure. And that's where the program kind of comes in play, where we can place them into the job partnerships that we've built. Where it's like, hey, we have a team of employers. Employers are willing to give people a second chance, even with facial tattoos. They just don't want to hire a project. And we tell them, if they're screwing up, fire them. But if like, hey, Tom's late every morning, and then we go, Tom, what's going on? He goes, well, I live 20 miles that way. And in Las Vegas, the bus system is very slow, and we don't have a light rail or a subway, not yet. Hey, Elon, help, please. And so I got to take 7 buses. And I got to leave at 4 a.m.
You got the great monorail that runs between 7 hotels.
Yeah, in the back of them. Doesn't even go down the strip. So we're like, okay, cool. Like I remember we had a guy who was struggling to get to work, but he was doing so well. He was so committed to the program. He was coming in on his days off. He was spending time. He was taking all the training classes that we had a little $3,000 Hyundai. We got it registered for him, and like, there you go. Taking care, problem solved. Now, that's not going to be every single time, but like, what do you need from us to help you get there by 8 a.m.? Like, that's an example of something that we could do with the partner employers are like, yeah, we'll hire them. And these guys are crushing it, and these gals.
It sounds like from when you were explaining it, when you were going in towards your retirement or into retirement, this wasn't your game plan. You kind of got recruited to come do it. Where do you see yourself going with this?
So that's a great question. I mean, ultimately, I love investigations. I'd like to think I was a pretty decent investigator. My original plan was to just get my private investigator's license. I have my own company, Vanguard Intelligence Group, training, consultation, what do you need kind of a thing. Maybe down the road, I think I will eventually pull the trigger and get my PI license. In Nevada, it's a little bit of a process, and it costs quite a bit. It keeps the riffraff out, but you do have to come up with some capital. But I thought to myself, so many police officers leave law enforcement to go into the security world. And my personality, I don't know that my personality type was ever meant to be a cop. I think I was a good one. I would like to think I had an amazing reputation, and I have people who have told me, you're the greatest sergeant I ever had. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way I was the greatest sergeant you ever had. I'm a very flawed human being. I have to wake up every morning and go to war with myself to get out of bed. Trust me, we can peel that onion back at another time. I just got up every day and went. That was kind of I had no talent. I felt like I have my mom was the showgirl designer, amazingly talented sister with, my cousin who could just do amazing things, salesman, just destroyed by drugs and alcohol. And I just I don't know what my talent is, but I know I get up every morning and I just go to work.
Consistency and determination.
If you want it bad enough, you're going to get it. And then, listen, man, we all have our days. There's some days where I'm just not in the mood. I had like some days I'm scatterbrained. Some days I'm, I love to stay in bed and never get out of it, but I know I have to get up and get to the gym, and I have to keep the body moving, and I have to, because I want as much in that dash. And so I just thought, what an opportunity I have. I loved that session, that monthly session where I would come in as that cadre of volunteer cops. That was one of the things that basically became the only thing I really looked forward to at the end of my career. Because when you're a patrol cop and you come in, you're like, I'm going to own my day. I am going to crush the day. You'd get in briefing and it was bad news, and the sergeant's in a bad mood, and the lieutenant's pissed off, and maybe the captain swung by and yelled at everyone because the numbers were down, and I just look at my watch and go, okay, cool, we done yet? And then I go get in my car, and that gate would open, and I owned Las Vegas. I'm like, this next 9.5 hours is mine. I control it. And I had a plan. And yeah, I know I'm going to this call, and all of a sudden a priority 0 shots fired pops up. And that was the fun of patrol. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to find out. And I'd always tell my cops, the greatest movie you'll ever watch is through the front windshield of a police car. It's the greatest movie screen in the world. It's tragic. It's funny. It's heroic. It's every genre, rom-com, horror, zombie apocalypse. We've seen it all. And as you start to move through your career, you start to eat that, oh, this tastes great. No, it doesn't, dude. And you're like, okay, I'm done with this. I move on to this. Oh, this tastes great now. Oh, I'm in SWAT. In 10 years, you're like, how many more barricades am I going to go on? How much more gas can I launch into a house? How many more
sitting on a containment at 3:00 in the morning?
Yeah, let me listen to the negotiators talk for 12 hours to a guy, do active listening skills on a guy to go, yeah, sounds like you're having a rough day. Why don't you come on out and we'll get you a cigarette? How many times are you going to do that before you go, this is my side hustle, and tomorrow I'm going to go mountain bike and hit the gym and take my wife to a lovely lunch, or whatever it is that you're into?
Find something. Get into it.
Something. Yes, I play a little guitar. I ride my motorcycle. I just bought a set of golf clubs. I pay for it through my company. It's a tax write-off. I took one lesson, and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I might be good at this. Find something. I promise.
Calm down. It's golf.
I know.
Give it 5 minutes.
I know. Yeah. But I know I did. I get one lesson, and the guy has me hitting dimes off of this board, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. He do this, do that. He adjusts, and listen to the expert. And it was it reminded me of firearms training. That new cop that's like never shot a gun in her life. She's got little tiny hands, and she's got this little gun. And then this dude over here who's a 20-year NCO and now goes into the law enforcement world is like, I know what I'm doing. And he's pushing that round down. And then we do the drills. Okay, yep. We'll put the dime on top of and then boom, that front sight dips and the dime or the penny falls off. Is where this young kid, 21-year-old girl, never shot a gun a day in her life. Boom, 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 boom. Right there. Right in the X. Okay, now do 20 push-ups and do it. Boom, 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 boom. Trainable, teachable. Yep. No bad habits. So that's my golf world.
How can people get in touch with you?
Excellent question. I'm on several social media platforms. I'm on Twitter at Ashton Packe, ASHTONPACKE. I'm on Instagram. I think it's Ashton_Packe. You can email me if it's security consulting, law enforcement questions. It's Ashton@VanguardVegas.com. And then if it's Hope for Prisoners, Ashton@hopeforprisoners.org. Hope for Prisoners is one word. I really encourage everyone, just Google Hope for Prisoners and check it out. We need male mentors. And I'm really want to push and drive in our retired LEO community and our military community. Men who have been there, done that, know how to call BS, know how to stick and carrot, prod when, coach when you need, pull the chains in when they're screwing things up, know when you're being lied to, know when, okay, that's not right. You know how to read that energy, and you don't have to be in Vegas to do it. We'll train you. We'll have you just an hour a week on a Zoom call, text message. Hey, what are you doing about getting your license done? I'm doing this, and that. Good. Keep it up. Case note done.
So they can, a mentor can do it via Zoom.
Yes. I prefer, like, I love to see them in person. Like I was a human guy for many years, working sources that didn't look anything like me. And I learned so much in that world of source development and human intelligence operations. But sitting down face to face, breaking bread with someone, having a cup of coffee, you start to build that rapport and peel the onion back and kind of find out what that person's all about. And that's where you really get that connection. But, like I said, we'll make lemonade with lemons, man. If you're in LA or you're in Salt Lake City and you want to help Hope for Prisoners, be a mentor, you can do it on the Zoom, or FaceTime or whatever that we'll figure it out. We'll muddle through.
Well, I wish you the best going forward on it.
Man, Paul, I'm so honored to be here, and I was home. I was very nervous coming in. I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and some of the last guests, I'm like, whoa, I've got some big shoes to fill, and but I feel like it went really well, and I really thank you for your time.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.